The Golden State Warriors bringing in Kristaps Porzingis was a move that signals pre-agency. Eric Pincus explains what that means coming up on today's show.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
What are they going to say now?
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the good word, everyone? Welcome to the Locked On Warriors. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making us the number one sports podcast network out there. Find the show on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts. I'm the host of the show. My name's Charlie Walter. I covered the team for 95.7 The Game and CBS News Bay Area in the past. Now leading you here on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Have your cake and drink it too. Birthday cake flavor is back. No fork needed. Vanilla-y cakey flavor, a caffeinated kick, and no sugar. It's party time. Order now at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Itinerary on today's show is very simple. First things first, let's tell you that Gui Santos has extended with the Golden State Warriors 3 years, $15 million. Seems fair to me. Seems team-friendly to me. We love Gui Santos. We'll take some more of Gui Santos. But how does this move affect the Warriors' long-term flexibility? Mainly because Gui Santos is one of the most tenured players, or expected to be one of the most tenured players with this new extension that he has. The short term, the long term, the salary cap, everything financially related is explained by Eric Pincus, a reoccurring guest on today's show. Here's that conversation. All right, we got a reoccurring guest at this point. It's Eric Pincus from Bleacher Report, Sports Business Classroom. Whenever I want details in the financial side of the NBA, it's confusing to me. It's not confusing to him. He's made a business out of this thing and really gives us the nuts and bolts on what's going on with the Golden State Warriors and the cap situation. Eric, welcome back to the show, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
For sure. Let's start with the Kristaps Porzingis situation, because the Warriors bring him in. They send out Jonathan Kuminga and his nearly $25 million, along with Buddy Hield's $9 million. So you clear up some space in terms of that, bringing in Porzingis back, who's an expiring contract. When you see a deal like this made, is there any part of you that wonders if it's just two salary dumps in terms of Kuminga and Buddy Hield to get off the money and the Warriors to refresh things next year? Or are there rules in place to where it doesn't really help them like that, and there's an opportunity that it is Porzingis longer term?
Well, I think, well, the question there would be like, what is longer term? Longer term might just be one more year. You know what I mean? The longer term question is Steph Curry's contract, right? Like, he expires, his contract does, after next season. So you've got this run that's lined up with Jimmy. Assuming Draymond Green opts in, he may opt out. Let's just assume for the moment that he opts in. You have Horford with a player option. Podziemski, you would imagine they'd keep beyond Curry, but his contract expires same time. The only players you have beyond, if you're the Warriors, beyond Steph, is Moody, and then they just signed Santos. They also have Will Richard, but that's non-guaranteed. So you could see that there's basically nothing on the books. So what we've been calling it, people like myself who study this stuff, we're calling it pre-agency instead of free agency. I don't want to say that free agency has, quote, died, because it evolves. But the NBA and the NBPA, and I've spoken to both sides of the negotiating table, they wanted to encourage extensions and they wanted to encourage trades. So they made it easier to make trades. And I know there's a lot of, especially in Warriors world, consternation about how hard the new system is, when the new system is actually significantly easier and looser when it comes to trades. We've had more trades under this new system than we ever had annually in the previous deal. It's way more difficult if you're way up here in terms of payroll, which is where the Warriors were. So, to kind of put it in a nutshell, you trade for Porzingis. Who is likely to chase him with money? When I have an article on Bleacher Report, it's like the Lakers, the Nets, the Bulls, and then we have a few maybes, like Atlanta. If they don't want to keep Kuminga, they could go to cap room, but I don't really project them to have cap room, but they could. The Clippers could have Kawhi Leonard's contract stricken from their books entirely. So let's not assume that happens, but it could. So there are some variables. And yes, teams can trade into, ways to get to cap room. Like the Bucks weren't supposed to have cap room this year, and they stretched Damian Lillard so they can get Miles Turner. Point being is, what team is doing that to what the Bucks just did? Or are the Lakers or the Nets or the Bulls going after Porzingis with their cap room? And realistically, he's just not healthy consistently. Whether it's an illness, whether he's had some Achilles stuff, he's a really talented player when he's on the court. He's a game changer in terms of what he can do offensively. And then he's got the size to be a problem defensively. He may not be like a Wembanyama, but he's still a giant dude. So when you put it all together, the Warriors, they're in a good position to keep him if they want to, because they have his rights. And that's what we mean by pre-agency, where you trade for the guy that you want to keep. The most likely market outside of those cap room teams might be $15 million for teams that have what's called the non-taxpayer mid-level, which is the largest spending tool. And he may not even get that. So, the Warriors, maybe they're in a position to keep him for 9 or 10 or 12, somewhere in that range. Maybe they have to go to 15, but they have the ability to work within, the flexibility. Of course, long-term is the one word I don't know the answer to. It might just be like a 1-year thing to keep Porzingis and finish up the run with Curry and then see what happens. Or maybe they start to plan for a longer Curry experience, or who the hell knows.
Could you see any situation where, like, in the back of the Warriors' minds, it was worst case scenario, this is a salary dump, and then we're including Buddy Hield's contract in it because he'd been struggling for the Warriors and had been signed for a few more years? Or you not think that was involved in any of the planning?
Well, I mean, Kuminga, it was obviously a long drama. I think it's very polarizing, and I know the Warriors fan base. It's like not quite at Kobe Shaq levels back in the day, where the Laker fan base was hugely divided over that. But I know that there's a very strong Kuminga contingent and a very strong anti-Kuminga contingent. So I don't want to get in the middle of that. That said, he was not a part of the team's long-term plan. And how do we know that? Because he's not on the team. And if he was a part of the long-term plan, they would have given him an extension that would have been a compromise that all sides would have agreed to. If they offered him a certain number for 4 or 5 years, he would have taken it. They didn't want to do that. And so he's gone. That was part of it, was I don't want to say the word, but cashing out his contract into a player that maybe can help them long-term. Again, we don't really know what long-term is. And then at a minimum, because they could have just voided out the option on Kuminga, so they got some value for it. And then Buddy, he had a very flexible, still does, a very flexible contract because he has long years, small guarantee. His number would have been easy to stretch at a very low number. So I don't know that it was a massive salary dump, so to speak. But realistically, if you have a player that you just don't need, who's not a part of what you're trying to do anymore, you want to move on, because roster space in the NBA is a premium. I mean, it took forever for them to get Pat Spencer onto the roster off of his two-way, because they had to go through all the machinations to do so. And they went through with the dance they went through. I know that Steph Curry's been hurt all year, but they did a little dance to get him. Like, they signed him and then they cut him and then they waited and they signed, So if you're paying Buddy Hield, who isn't really a part of what you're trying to do, then trade him. So I don't know that it's necessarily a grand master plan for a specific action that they have in mind. Very few teams have like a singular, we're doing this to accomplish that. It's more, we're maximizing our flexibility. We can get Porzingis. If he works out, we can keep him. We don't need Buddy. We're getting out of his money. It's not crazy money. If we didn't get out of him, we'd be fine too. They got some value. Did they get enough value? I'm sure the Kuminga side of the fan base says that they messed that situation up. And the other side of the fan base will probably say they're lucky they got anything. You know what I mean? I don't want to get in the middle of that. But I don't know that there's like a long-term, this is the answer. And I think it's all, the real question is Curry, and what does he want to do? How long does he want to play? And then how do they manage paying to build around him if he decides to stay, if they want him to stay? Or do they start to think about 2027 as this opportunity to go chase the next star player, the next franchise players, which, to go back to earlier in our conversation, they've sort of marginalized how valuable free agency is. So more likely than not, the best players will have already extended by then. So this is the battle that they're waging, where there is no clear answer, because no team has that clear answer. They just have a direction they're headed in, right or wrong. We'll see how they do.
Straight ahead, how are the Warriors going to keep De'Anthony Melton in the Bay Area longer term? We have that answer.
Destroy Jimmy and Domino's. I know Jimmy drinks great wine.
The season is heating up, and DoorDash is a way to keep fans in their bag the whole way through. Whether you're watching the highlights, the tunnel fits, or just your favorite player, DoorDash makes the entire season more fun because every player has their bag. And with DoorDash, fans have one too. DoorDash keeps your snacks stocked, your gear fresh, and your watch party vibes absolutely on point. There are nights where your team stresses you out. Let DoorDash get you dessert now when you need it. If the group chat says pull up, always be stocked with DoorDash from anything from chargers to socks, snacks, cups, from tip-off to overtime. Stay in your bag and order on DoorDash. Get snacks, drinks, gear, whatever gets you through the season, delivered right to your door. DoorDash, in your bag all season long. Now's a great time to check out our Everydayers program. If you can't get enough of the Locked On Sports Podcast Network and Locked On Warriors specifically, the #1 sports podcast network out there, you can be a member of the Everydayer Club. We got specially tailored Discords just for the most diehard Golden State Warriors fans. I'll be hopping in there. You can also find Discords on other teams nationally with other hosts in there as well. Stay up to date on the association with the Locked On Everydayers Club, ad-free episodes, much, much more. Check them out in the bio.
And buddy, stop trying to dribble the ball.
I want to get into that big fish talk in just a second, but first, a middle tier fish, De'Anthony Melton, who's playing like the biggest fish on the Warriors right now without Steph Curry on the team. He's been, arguably their best player over the last month. With him being healthy, and if he is to continue, find the wood and knock on it, healthy throughout the rest of the season, there's a lot of talk that the Warriors wouldn't have the financial flexibility to extend him and have him as a part of the future. He's a young enough guy, plays a position that you need. You have him in-house. Staff clearly loves him. He clearly likes Golden State enough to be involved in the Schroeder trade and then come back. What do you think his number would be realistically with the way he's playing right now?
Well, so he has a player option for 3.5, which is the minimum.
No chance he takes that, right?
I don't like to say no chance because he could get hurt, and that there's always the possibility something terrible happens. But realistically, he's not going to take that option simply because he's going to have 9, he'll have 7, so he'll have 8 years of service. So his contract if he's minimum, not saying he's minimum, right? But if he were minimum, then his number is going to be about 3.5 anyway on a new contract. If he opted out and re-signed at the minimum, which is like worst case, he would still get slightly more money by doing so. So there's no incentive for him to opt in because he can opt out and get the minimum and get more than the option. So from a basic business point of view, why would you do that? And the only argument would be is if he had an injury and was going to be out for next year, which hopefully that's nowhere in any reality. So again, we get back into that Porzingis conversation where there are 3 teams with cap room, maybe 5, maybe another team swaps in, and maybe there's someone we don't expect, but there's very few teams that have cap room. You have to ask how many of those teams are going through the cap room path to go after De'Anthony Melton, who is, he's not young, but he's not old, but he has had a serious injury. And I think he's a good player. I just don't know that, you could argue maybe the Lakers go after some bigger name players and maybe they have 15, 20 million to spend in cap room. I could see that. You could argue the same thing for the Bulls. Their main target wouldn't be De'Anthony Melton. The Bulls, the Nets, I guess in theory, but it doesn't feel like that makes sense, right? Like, I don't see why the Nets would, but because they're so young and they're rebuilding. But I don't think De'Anthony Melton is the centerpiece of the Lakers or the Bulls strategy. And so, however, they may have an extra 20 million when they do achieve whatever their goals are. And they may not even achieve their goals. And if they don't, then maybe they're piecing together a team of role players. Melton would be a good role player with someone like Luka because he can defend, and you need another playmaker, but Melton's not necessarily like a 9-assist guy. So you need somebody who can play without the ball, used to playing with a star. There's a lot of reasons you can argue that. But let's say no. Let's say that those cap teams don't. Then you're back at the mid-level exception. And the mid-level exception next year projects to be about 15 million, right? 15.1. And some other teams might have 6 million with the taxpayer mid-level. The room mid-level is about 9.5. Those are the spending exceptions that those teams might have. And maybe that's it. Maybe a team like the Lakers spends all their money and then use the room exception on a Melton for 9.4. That's your competition. And if you're the Warriors, you only have what's called non-bird. Let's see, what kind of rights do they have? I don't think they have non-bird rights for Melton. So the most they can do is 120% of next year's minimum, which is 3.5 times 1.2, which is not a lot. It's certainly not the amount that the Lakers could pay. They can also use one of their own spending exceptions. The challenge is you're paying Santos. How much are you paying Porzingis? There's a world in which they could have the Warriors could have 15 million in their mid-level, or maybe they use the taxpayer mid-level. It depends on number of does Al Horford come back? Does he opt in? Do they opt him out and re-sign him on a multi-year deal, maybe partially guaranteed multi-years? So I don't know how Al Horford feels about this, but if I were the Warriors, I might propose opt out. We'll re-sign you for a little bit less, but we'll do like a 3-year deal and we'll make it, it'll be non-guaranteed and we'll cut you.
Al.
Yeah, Al Horford. Like there might
get
be a
him
way
into
to
his early 40s. Yeah.
Yeah, like there might be a way to stretch out his money, not wave and stretch, but opt him out, have him opt out, re-sign him at a lower number, but a 3-year deal to make up the numbers longer term. Again, that his agent and Al Horford, they may think he still has years left to play. And anyway, just a thought. They also, are they keeping Gary Payton? I don't know the exact number, but let's say that Santos is locked in at $5 million. And if we drop Al Horford just for kicks down to 4, that's like $6 million for Porzingis. Is that enough? And then $9 million for Melton. Let's see, what does that add up to? Okay, let's do $9 million for Porzingis as well. And then Pat Spencer at the minimum, theoretically. That puts the team $1 million below the first apron. So they could go higher. They just they would still have the taxpayer mid-level now. There are different. I could see different pathways. You also have to ask, where does LeBron want to do? Is there a universe in which Kawhi Leonard's contract is voided? And I don't know that the Nets, the Lakers, and the Bulls, maybe they pay Kawhi Leonard. Maybe they don't. And if they don't, he's looking at 15 million, just like everybody else who doesn't get cap room. I was crunching numbers. Is there a way that the Warriors could go after a LeBron or a Kawhi?
Kawhi, man.
His contract is voided. I'm not assuming that Kawhi's contract is voided. My job is to just run all the scenarios and see what all possibilities that I can think of are. And yeah, I could come up with a scenario the question is, let me change Melton's number. So if you put in Melton at 9 million. So there's some scenarios, right? You still have a roster spot. So here's it's not quite it. So let's do taxpayer mid-level. Let's just say that theoretically they kept Porzingis and Melton at 9 million each. Al Horford's back in some form, maybe opting in. They'd still have the taxpayer mid-level. So their budget to spend in free agency is about 6 million. That's assuming they're keeping Gary Payton or someone else at a minimum, Pat Spencer at the minimum. They could do about 6.1. And again, I don't pencil them in as a team that's looking for long-term pieces right now. But that could change. Maybe they decide on a longer direction. We're sort of assuming 1-year deals for everybody, except for maybe Al Horford on sort of a fake 1-year deal. It's just theoretical.
The Warriors have a ton of money coming off the books in a few years. How could they spend it? Well, any way they want. We'll explain.
Forget that. We champs. Why are you starting with that question? We got 4 championships.
Welcome to the 5-Hour Energy Flavor Draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like Confetti Craze, Fruity Rainbow, or Cotton Candy. There's something for everyone. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and I've got my number 1 pick for the 5-Hour Energy Flavor Draft. It's Cotton Candy. Takes me back to a younger day where I didn't need a bunch of 5-Hour Energies. But man, as you get older, they help you out. They give you a little caffeinated kick. Good stuff with 0 sugar. Lots of upcoming flavor innovations planned. And I'm telling you, whether it's long road trips, a round of golf, staying up late with the kids, whatever it may be, no sugar, no crash later. Find your new favorite flavor of 5-Hour Energy shots available at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Today's episode is also brought to you by GameTime. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why GameTime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Pull up the GameTime app, and within minutes, you'll have all-in price up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You'll be able to see your seat with a panoramic view to make sure that it's quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com.
And buddy, stop trying to dribble the ball.
When you talk Warriors and having $150 million of cap potentially opening up when Curry, Jimmy, and Draymond all say see at the same time, how does that work in terms of, and I know you said free agency's not as big as it once was, and it's going to be hard for the Warriors to go out and pluck two massive players, but like, can they spend that any way they want and just be like, you know what, we're getting Jokic and Giannis in a hypothetical world. We're paying them both. We're bringing them in. We're getting Curry for another year. Like, how would that work? I guess not Curry, but.
Well, Curry would change that significantly. I'm just going to pencil in for Santos $5 million. I haven't seen the contract, and it just was announced today, or at least reported
3
today.
for 15. Yep.
So let's say that they're just Moody, Santos. They have a couple of picks, right? They have the pick from 27. I actually think let me double check here. Do they have any extra picks? They have a second from LA. So that'd be, let's just pencil it in as a minimum. So let's just say that they're first this year, they're first the next year. Make sure they still have that first. Yeah, they still have that first. You're looking at Moody, Santos, 2 firsts, and you have what's called roster charges, which are just, you have to fill it up to 12. They would have, with a projected cap of 178, they'd have about 138 million in cap, which is a staggering amount. If you're keeping Curry, you would re-sign him at the max, basically. There's no difference whether you sign him before or after you use the cap room. His free agent cap hold, which is it's kind of like a placeholder that takes up cap room. So you have the right, if you're the Warriors, to pay Steph Curry. Those rights are going to cost a certain formula based on his expiring salary. Let's just pencil in a max, right? So we do. His is actually probably higher than the regular max because of I'd have to actually look. He's probably 105%, but let's just plug in a regular max just for the hell of it. Like 60. Let's just push that to 63 million flat. Just an estimate. They're at about 77 million. So they can probably afford one more max guy and Curry, or they can afford Curry. Well, no Curry, they could just afford 2 max guys, right? But let's say those max guys aren't as expensive. It could be, if you're saying Jokic and Giannis, those are going to be similar maxes. So in the $63 million range, you could just sign 2 of those players outright. With cap room, you could do, you're limited to 4 years, but you can sign players to, that's like what the Sixers did with Paul. Did I lag?
No, you're good. So
I think I left a little bit. Okay, all right.
You're right. You cut there. Did you have anything else on that point, or were you finishing with Paul George?
Paul George with the Sixers, like they signed him for almost $50 million. That's how cap room works. You just sign whoever you want.
Yeah.
Whoever wants to come.
Last question I have for you. Are the Warriors in a good spot right now in terms of where they sit financially? They've been in a bad spot for a while, it feels like, with lack of flexibility, and they've set themselves up for next summer, not this upcoming, but the next summer. Books are pretty much cleared.
I mean, were they in a bad spot when they needed to, when they traded for Jimmy Butler, like that didn't feel like a bad spot. It felt like they were able to get it done. They got one of the best players, top 15, top 20 players in the league. If Steph doesn't have the injury, I don't know that they beat the Warriors, but I viewed them as a team that had a real shot to win, especially against, what the Warriors didn't have was experience. And if they played a team like the Warriors with Jimmy and Steph, I'm not saying they win, but that's more of a challenge for them. I think good and bad are sort of subjective terms. I don't know that they define. I just think everyone has a different point of view. They have a lot of flexibility. But flexibility is great, but you have to be able to execute. The hardest thing to do is to get your best player, your franchise building player. The Spurs got Victor Wembanyama. Maybe Dallas has that with Cooper Flag. You start going through and looking like who has a player that is so unique that they could be among the best of the best. Well, the Warriors have had one of the greatest of all time in that for a very long time now. So replacing that is the challenge. And if you're not replacing it and he's staying, how long can he be that heliocentric player that destroys teams when, that you can build around? And maybe Steph can do this another 3 or 4 years, or maybe this is the end of the road for this particular run next year. These are questions I don't have an answer to. Just saying, yes, they're in a strong position with flexibility. They're not overinvested in terms of their draft picks. They have a lot of cap room coming up. It's just a question of, what do they do with it? They've got some good talent. They don't have like outrageous young talent. Santos is really nice, but you're not going to build your franchise around him. Moody is solid, right? He's a good, solid player. There are other, Pat Spencer's not even young, but he's a nice, I don't want to say young player, but he hasn't been in the league that long. Point is like none of these guys are franchise stars, and Steph is that. So yes, they're in a strong position. Let's say we compare them to the Lakers. Lakers then are overextended with draft obligations, like they've traded away most of their picks. The Warriors aren't in as heavy a situation there, so they're in a better position than the Lakers on that regard. But in terms of flexibility, both teams are going to have substantial flexibility this year, potentially next. The difference is that the Lakers have a younger star that they can build around, and the Warriors don't. And it just depends. If Steph can match Luka as that over the next 3 years, then great. But if not, how do you get to that player? And sometimes you need to be really, really awful and get that player in the draft, which is a whole nother argument because the NBA is trying to give team or take away incentive to be lousy. So that's a good thing. You don't want to be lousy. You want to be able to rebuild without being lousy. But that sounds good. But how? How do you then get that best young player to build around? And can they trade for that player? Maybe, but I don't know what great young player is available. So then you're sort of like, well, maybe you're trying to build around Steph and Jokic or Steph and Giannis or something like that, and then go another 3 years like that. It's a path. Is it the right path? I don't know. It's an older path. It's not like a sustainable long-term path, but it may not have to be. If you can get a ring in the next couple of years doing that, then it's a great path, right? So
For sure.
TBD.
For sure. All right. At Eric Pincus on X is where you can find him. Bleacher Report, Sports Business Classroom. It's just good stuff. He's an educational dude. We have plenty of people on the show that spew off takes. He spews off facts and knowledge, and we appreciate that, Eric. Thanks for coming on, man.
All right, anytime. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
This is Locked On Warriors, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.